Again!
You ready? Hey, welcome to Something Familiar. Let's talk about communication. And clap. The first point to make would be to recognize the fact that people communicate differently. For instance, I am very open, I'm expressive, sometimes to a fault where I tend to share too much, but that's just who I am and how I communicate. When we think about communication, it's important to recognize that we need to meet people where they're at and on their level and not expect them to do the return right off the bat. Think about a boss or somebody, an authoritative type figure that talks very directly, very sternly, but the way that they communicate is direct. It's to the point, there is no added anything to it. It could be dads, it could be moms, it could be the shitty neighbor next door. It's important to kind of take a more empathetic approach to it and put ourselves in their shoes in these conversations. They're not being mean, that's just how they communicate. When we have a conversation and we open lines of communication with people like this, setting realistic expectations should be at the forefront of our brains. Setting the expectation to be open to listening, to hearing what somebody else has to say, and really just understand that when people are communicating with us, they may have the best of intentions, and we're just not used to their communication styles, just as they may not be used to our communication styles. And even if they don't have our best intentions at heart, it's always best to assume that they do and lead with that. Because what makes more sense? Is this stranger who doesn't know us at all setting out to fuck up our day intentionally, or are they just communicating on a different level than we are? One of my first experiences with learning effective communication was actually not a positive one. In my late teens and early 20s, when I was taking up management roles through retail companies back in the Midwest, I was taught that the only way to effectively communicate with my team was to just be straightforward, tell them what the fuck was up, and make them listen, make them do the things that needed to be done. Because in their mind, getting the task done was more important than how somebody felt, how somebody viewed the situation, and how somebody could actually be affected by things that are going on outside of work. We just talk about what a load of shit that is, and that's how business is done. Fuck all that. Effective communication begins at meeting somebody at their level, where they're at, and understanding that what they have going on in their life may be representative of their actions. Let's talk about language. Becoming an effective communicator means not just learning how somebody else prefers to communicate, but becoming aware of how we communicate ourselves to bridge that gap. A big part of learning how you communicate actually comes down to the language itself, not necessarily all the tonality, but focusing on specific words and redefining them so that other people can meet you at that same level. Take the word important. We may have very similar definitions, but the meaning behind them is actually different for me than it is for you. When I say the word important, that means everything else going on is now less important than what we're talking about. That word is such a strong meaning that I choose to use it infrequently as possible until it is absolutely necessary to convey the point and to convey the tone and the message behind it that says, this is the focal point. We break down language into two parts, tone and word choice. And based on how we say something with inflection in our voices and the words that we choose, could alternatively change the conversation for the better or for the worse if we're not careful. Take, for example, the language that we use in everyday conversation and now import it into a rapper's lyrics. Those lyrics, spoken by Ben Stein, they could have the most fire bars of all time, but if you're listening to him drone on about it, it just doesn't feel the same. When we start to spend time teaching each other how we want to be spoken to, the words that we choose and what they mean to us, it allows us to actually speak the same language now. We're no longer guessing or inferring what somebody may mean. We're taking them at face value for their word because we've spoken in a mutual conversation about what these words mean to us individually. You know what anxiety loves? Speculation. You know what anxiety fucking hates? Clarity. Get clear on what you're saying. You hear that? You would if you were listening. Active listening is arguably the most important factor when it comes to communication. Now, when I say active listening, I don't just mean listening to the words that they're saying and hearing everything, but really with the intent of understanding. You're not sitting there with your mouth open, staring, waiting to respond. You're not looking through your phone and scrolling. You're not staring at the ground or the ceiling or the clock. You're sitting there quietly, intently. You're looking them in the eyes as they communicate, and you're waiting for a chance to communicate back with them when they give you that time and they begin the act of listening. We're actually leaving people space to talk and communicate their desires, their intentions, their motives, whatever it may be, and try to come up with a solution with them together, rather than listening to just respond, which is what we see a lot of people doing now. As I've learned more since focusing on myself and my growth, I've learned that I used to always want to have the answers for everybody in my life. I wanted to always be right. I wanted to always have the right answer, the right thing to say at the right moment, just to make things better. And it came from a place of compassion, but it also came from a place of insecurity. It wasn't as simple as somebody could come with a problem to me and we could just vent it out and just listen. I had to have an answer. I had to be the engineer. I had to be the problem solver for those people in my life. One of the most important things I've learned is that when I get an abrupt phone call, an emergency call, somebody's having a horrible day, they need somebody to talk to and just to vent it out, is to actually ask them the question, do you just want me to listen, or do you want me to help you solve this? Now, what was that quote? Like 90% of it is just showing up. And what that does now is I no longer feel like I have to answer or solve problems unless I'm asked to. But it also allows for an open line of communication with them that says, hey, I just want to talk, I just want to vent, I want to get this shit off my chest because it's causing me to have a bad day. So I urge you to take this important thing that I've learned and turn it into a technique that you now use in your regular communication with other people in your life. Ask them, can I help you solve this? Or do you just want me to listen right here, right now, and be on your side? Communicating effectively is not only foundational, but it's life-changing. And honestly, we're not talking about it enough.